Hello guys, so we are going to continue the discussion with respect to SQL and we have already started regarding SQL constraints. In our previous video, we had discussed about not null, unique constraint and primary key. In this particular video, we are going to discuss about foreign key, check constraint and default constraint. But many people had some queries regarding primary key yesterday, so I'm again going to show you, I'm going to re-explain about primary key, then we'll go to foreign key, then we'll see about check constraint and default constraint. Okay, but just to start with, the definition of SQL constraint is very much simple. They are used to specify any rules for the records in the table. Constraints can be used to limit the type of data that can go into the table. It ensures the accuracy and reliability of the records in the table, and if there is any violation between the constraint and the record action, the action is aborted. So based on that, you try to apply some kind of constraints in the records when you're trying to insert the data into the query, and if it does not get satisfied with this constraint, then what will happen? Then entire query will be blocked or it will not get executed. Now let's go ahead and let's first of all discover our primary key, and we'll try to understand how to create primary key by using a query. Probably I'll also create a table over here. But one thing I really want to talk about primary key is that it makes your record, it makes your entire record uniquely identified. Okay, and that is what, with the help of primary key, that we can actually do. Okay, and let's see this how to do it. First of all, I'm just going to, I've already created a database, so I'm going to use a customer database which I have already created. If you see my previous video, you'll be able to understand it. And then probably I will create a table over here. So I'll say create table person. Remember, whenever you are learning something new, it's always a good habit that you try to write queries as much as possible. By that specific way, you will be able to learn a lot. So first thing I'm going to take is ID. Here what I'm going to do is that ID, I will never, I'll apply a constraint which is called as not null. And then probably I'll go with the next thing that is called as first name. And it is up to you. Whatever you want to define, you can define. I've never restricted you for doing that. Okay. And this will also be not null. Okay, not null, then again it will be comma, then probably you can have last name, and this will also be a varchar with respect to 25. Okay, varchar is one type of, you can just say that it is a data type. I'll also be probably discussing about different kind of data types. I think I have missed those videos also, but don't worry, it will come. And finally, age int, this can have not null value also. Now in order to define the primary key, what I'm going to do is that very simply, I'm just going to say, I'm going to use the constraint which is called as primary key. And then I will specify that which feature I'm going to basically consider as primary key. So here I'm just going to write it as ID. Okay. Um, Once I execute this, you'll be able to see that the table has got created. Now, let me just write it down. So I can basically write DESC of table person. I'm just going to see the schema of this particular table, and here you can see that the first feature ID will have this key which is called as primary key. Okay, so this particular feature will identify your entire record, and based on that identification you can use it for various purpose, which I will probably show you how can when we are designing the databases, when we are designing the tables, right, how one table is linked to the other table, all those things we'll try to see. Okay, very simple. Again, I have repeated the same thing that I've probably taught you in the last class. Now let me just show you. There is also some examples where what we can do is that we can combine multiple columns and we can create it as a primary key. So that way also we can add a constraint. So what I'm going to do over here, I'm just going to say drop table. Okay, I can also write alter column, alter query, but I will just create it from scratch. So I'm saying drop table person. Probably this will get executed. It has got dropped. Now what changes I'm going to make? I'm going to basically say create table person ID, everything is same. Inside this last thing, okay, what I'm going to basically write, I'm going to basically create a constraint. Okay, when I combine multiple column names, right, then I have to definitely specify it as a constraint, and then I will give a constraint name. I'll say pk underscore person, that is basically like primary key of person, and this will basically be my primary key, and then I will specify which all columns will come into this constraint. So here I'm going to mention as id comma last name. Okay, so this two combination I can basically take and create my primary key. So once I execute it, and now once I show you my describe or schema of this, here you'll be able to see now ID has a primary and last name has a primary. Okay. So this too definitely has this primary key that is basically present over there. So this was a good way to basically create a primary key. And probably what I'm going to do, let's say adding a primary key using alter feature, like I told you, right? Once you have created a table, okay, and probably you missed defining primary key, then what you're going to do? Okay, so suppose I'm just going to drop this table person. Now the next thing that I'm going to do, I'm just going to remove this. Okay, I'm just going to say, okay, this is not null. And this is my table. Now create table person ID int not null, this varchar and int. Okay, so here I'm actually defining, and definitely I forgot to mention about the primary key. So here you can see that ID is not having any primary key. Okay, now what I can do basically to create the primary key, now after creating the table, can I make some changes so that I can put the primary key? So here I'm going to say alter table student, and I am going to say add primary key of, I'm going to just add it as ID. Okay. So once I execute this, you will be able to see that it got executed successfully. Now, if I write describe of person, now you'll be able to see, okay, okay, student, sorry, it should be person. Okay, my mistake. So student, I had already created that specific table long back, I guess. So once I'm going to execute this now, instead of writing student, I've written person. I just forgot it. And then here you can see my ID is basically having primary key as this option. Perfect. So I have basically altered my table and probably uh, created a primary key altogether. Now similarly I can also use alter table, and what I can do is that I can also create, I can take two columns and make it as a primary key. That also I'll show you. So I'm just going to say drop table person, just to, so that I can recreate it. Now here I'm just going to create this entire query. Okay. And now if I go and see my describe person, here you'll be able to see none of the primary keys there. Now let me go ahead and write one alter query. So I'm going to say alter tables person, alter table person, and then I'm going to just add constraint. Okay, so as usual we add a constraint in an alter query. Okay, and here I'm just going to say pk underscore student, or sorry, pk underscore person, because I did it with student sometime back, so that is still there in my mind. So this is my name of the constraint, and here I'm going to use primary key, and this will basically have my feature id comma first name. Let's take this too. Okay, id comma first name, or instead of id comma first name, let's take id comma age. Okay, very simple. I've got executed now. Now if I go and see probably my describe person, here you can see id is also having a primary key and age is also having a primary key. Perfect. So this has got executed now. Now at the end of the day, if I want to drop this, I can drop it easily. So I'll say, again, for that I want to drop the primary key. Okay, so I'll say alter table person. Okay, alter table person, and then probably see, to drop just a single primary key, I can write drop primary key. Okay, this is one query. Suppose you want to drop the entire keys, like two keys you basically had. Okay, you can take that as an example. Okay, what I will write after drop. Okay, just tell me. Okay, and just try to execute that. Okay, if you really want to drop this. So I hope you got an idea about primary keys. We have spent a lot of time. Now the second thing that we are going to consider is about the foreign key. Okay, so what all things we can actually do with respect to a foreign key and all, probably will know about it, and we'll try to see that what all things we can actually do. Okay, so yes, let me do one thing. Let me remove some of the queries and quickly drop the table person, and then we will try to create two tables, and then we'll try to see it. Okay, so I'm going to drop the table of the person. Okay, I've also created this drop table person. Let me just execute it again. Okay, unknown table customer person. So person is not there. Okay. Now with respect to the foreign keys, always understand why do we use foreign keys. Let's say I have two tables. Okay. One table, one specific column, I want to use it in the other table. Okay. Probably let's consider that I have a student table. In student table, I have called as student unique ID. Okay. I want to use that student unique ID, okay, in some other table. Since this is the primary key, right? Since this is the primary key, we may want to reference this into some other table. So by this particular way, you will be able to refer it and you will be able to use it for different purpose. Okay. Uh, with respect to definition, I have written there in my one of my sheet. I can say that a foreign key is used to link two tables together. It is sometimes also called as referencing key. A foreign key is a combination of columns, can be a single columns whose value matches a primary key in the different table. Okay. A relationship between two table matches the primary key in one of the table with a foreign key in the second table. So that basically means if there is a primary key in one table, if I'm referring that specific thing to the other table, then it becomes a foreign key, and we can basically write some amazing queries with the help of this. Okay, and let me just show you some of the examples. So I'm just going to make a comment foreign key. Okay, so the first thing, let me create a table. So I'll say create table. I can use the same thing if I want, but okay, I will just copy this. Okay, so here is my create table, age int, and here let me take one more feature like salary int. Okay, and then probably I will also define my primary key and I will say ID. Okay, so once this is there, I will just try to execute it. This has got executed. Now if I write the C of person, I will be able to see this as my output. Okay, so this basically has my primary key. Perfect. So till here we have done. let's uh, let's create one more probably one more table. Let me see how many tables I basically have. So I'm just going to write show tables. Okay, customer info, person, and student. Okay, so right now I've created the person. Let me just say I have one table called as department. Create table department, and inside this I may have my ID. Again, this is the same ID, that is your student ID. Okay, so here I'll say int, this should be not null. Okay, then probably I can basically say department name. Okay, and this will also be a varchar 25, and this will be a not null. Okay, suppose these are my just two features. I just want to consider a very simple example before I start ahead. Suppose I want to create this column. Now this ID should be referring this person ID. Okay, apart from this, I may also have one feature which is called as department underscore ID, which will again be an int, and this may act as a primary key of this particular table. Okay, so two things that we will probably create over here. I will say primary key, and I'll assign it to my department ID. Okay, department ID. Okay, and then I will also apply a constraint. Sorry, I'll also apply a constraint. So I'll say constraint, and this constraint will be my foreign key. So I'll say fk underscore person department. Okay, let's in the naming convention you can use anything that you want, and this will get assigned to my foreign key, and this foreign key will be the ID, right? So here I'm basically going to use the ID over here. Okay, so guys, I hope yeah, everybody has written till here. Now there is one thing that needs to be added. See, I have actually created a constraint which is called as fk underscore person department, and I'm mentioning that the foreign key is specifically this ID, and this ID should be the primary key of this particular person. So we really need to write one important thing which is called as references. So once I write references, then probably I'll be using my table name from where it is basically coming, and here I'm going to specify it as ID. So What does this basically say? That I am creating a constraint of a foreign key which is called as foreign person department, and the id that you can see over here, this is basically the foreign key, and it is basically referencing from the person id column where it is specified as a primary key. So once I execute this, everything will get executed. Now if I go and see my description of department, you will be able to see that id will be shown as multi key. That basically means just like a foreign key over here, department id will be your primary key. So I hope you have understood this, okay, and then you got a basic idea about how things are basically referenced in the terms of foreign key. Now there may be situation that many people, what they do, that they actually create the table and then later on they update the foreign key. So can we do that? Yes, obviously we can do that. So first of all, I'm just going to drop the department, okay, and let's show you. Okay, drop table department, okay. So this has got dropped. Now again I'm going to create it. I'm not going to add any references, just I'll add the primary key and probably I'll execute it. This will also get executed now. Now here you can see that I've created a department where I've only specified the primary key. I did not specify the foreign key, which was this ID. And this ID is basically the person ID which is getting referred from this particular table. So now in order to add it or in order to update it, I can again use alter table. So I'll say alter table department, okay, and I can basically say add foreign key, okay, and this foreign key I'll say it for id, okay, and this will basically reference, it basically references the which id, the person id, right? So if I write like this, it will definitely get executed. Let's see whether I get any error. So here it says that it has got successfully executed. Now if I go and see with describe department, now here you can see that this ID is basically having this key called as mult, which is nothing but which is the foreign key which is denoted in this specific way. Now guys, we have understood about primary key and foreign key. Let's complete two more topics, which is called as constraints, check constraints, okay. So here I'm going to basically say check constraints. Now why this check constraint is basically used, for that let me do one thing. um, Here you'll be able to see that I have specified, I have created a table called as person, okay. So in this person, if I say, if I want to put any constraint in one of the column, like what value the user can insert, okay. Suppose I'll say that salary should not be greater than probably 50,000, okay. Okay, so this kind of constraint also I can basically add, and that will be possible by using check constraint. Now, two things that I'm going to do over here. First of all, I'm going to drop my department, drop table department, okay, just to show it to you. Okay, and then probably I will also show, I'll drop the table person. The reason why I'm dropping, because I just want to create a simple table and show it to you by creating some constraint. So here I'm going to use again uh, create a table person. This is there. Primary key is also specified. Now what I'm going to do after this is that I can use a constraint name which is called as check, and here I'll say is that the salary, I can only insert salary which is less than 50,000. Okay, so if I execute this particular table, so here you can see that a table is created. Let me see whether I can see this in the schema also. So describe person. Here nothing is specified. Okay, here probably you will not be able to see this, but I will be able to show it to you when I insert into person values. Okay, and here I'm going to specify value like 1, um, Krish, okay, Nayak, and probably the age feature is there. Age should be integer. I'm going to use 31. And what is the next feature? Salary. Salary. Now, if I try to put 60,000, okay, let's see whether it will give us an error. So once I execute it, you will be able to see that check constraint person underscore check underscore 1 is violated. Okay, that basically means if I'm trying to insert greater than 50,000, then it is a problem. If I go and probably just write 40,000, and then if I execute it, you'll be able to see that it has got executed and the inserted the row is basically inserted. So if you see select star from person, here it is, you'll be able to see the values that is got inserted. Perfect. So this was an example with respect to check constraint. The other thing is that you can also drop this check constraint. It is up to you. Just try to have a look onto that. Again, you have to use alter. You can see the syntax and you can probably put the values over there. Now let me discuss about the last topic, which is called as default constraint. Okay, default constraint. Okay, now in this default constraint, what I am going to do is that, again, let me see, it's very simple. Default means some default value will be there, right? Let me do one thing. Let me drop person table, drop table person, and then probably I'll create it again so that you'll be able to understand. Okay, now I want to basically, we can specify one feature by default whenever those feature is basically created, right? So let's consider this. I will just try to show you one example. Okay, let me make it very simple. I don't want so many things. I'll just remove this and probably I'll just say, um you know I'll say city. Okay, city underscore name, and let's say that this is varchar 25, and it will be here. After this, as soon as I add this thing, by default it should take some value. Okay, it should take some value, like I will just say that if I really want to specify some value default, I'll say, okay, this city name will probably Bangalore by default. It's like base location for a specific job. Okay, I want to just specify it's Bangalore. Okay, and now let's go and execute this. Okay, it has got executed. Now if I go and cdsc of person and just execute it, you will be able to see that. See this id is there. By default it is null value over here, but for the city name it is Bangalore. That basically means if you are not specifying any value to this city name when you are inserting the records, directly it is going to use Bangalore, right? So I hope you like this particular video. Again, one more assignment in this is that once I have added this, how do you remove this? Okay, how do you drop a default constraint? Just try to do it. um, Again, I can definitely help you out. Let me just write it down. Let me make your task a little bit easier. So alter table person, and I will say drop or alter city underscore name. Okay. Here I'll say drop default. Okay. So this is the query that we specifically use. It has got executed. Now if I go and see of description of person, here now again you'll be having the null values, right? So I hope you like this particular video, guys. Again, we have discussed about primary key, foreign key, check constraint, default constraint, and we have discussed a lot, right? Now the thing is that you really need to practice things, okay? Now in the upcoming videos, we'll be seeing a lot of things, how to create an index statement, how to create stored procedures, how to create triggers, many more things are going to come. So yes, I will see you all in the next video. Thank you.